What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Phaithful Phanatics show, live here on DSM Media's YouTube and Twitter channels. Guys, first and foremost, if you are new to the channel, make sure to check us out on Twitter at DSM_media. Hit that follow button. We greatly appreciate it. And while you're over on the Twitter page, make sure to check out the link tree in our bio. It'll take you to every social media platform we are available on. If you guys want to be interactive throughout today's show or any of our shows here at DSM, make sure to check out the YouTube link specifically. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications for whenever we go live. And drop your comments along here with your host. I am one half of them today, Dylan Davis. You can find me on Twitter at DylanJD98. To my right, my faithful co-host, Scotty. You can find him as well at Scotty Drown. And today, we are joined by the man, Sean Barnard. You can find him at Sean_Barnard. He writes for Philly Sports Network, PSN, and he's also an insider at Fox, The Gambler. Sean, thanks for joining us, and nice to meet you, bro.
Yeah, appreciate you guys for having me on. I feel like I'm finally at the point where I can shake off the Sixers hangover of not wanting any part of them and starting to turn the corner and look ahead. So bouncing back, I think everyone feels a little similar, so feels good.
Yeah, the Phillies aren't helping with that, but yeah.
True, very true.
Right. I didn't realize you guys haven't met yet. Have you guys not done
No, we've never worked together.
Yeah.
First time.
Awesome. Nice.
Twitter and stuff like that. I'm
Yeah.
familiar, but never in person now.
Awesome.
Yes, sir. But all right, man, let's get right into it here. And obviously, I think one of those reasons that you're getting over the Sixers' pain a little bit is because they were able to fill that void that was their head coaching vacancy after, relieving Doc Rivers of his duties. So to start off, just your initial thoughts on the Nick Nurse hire. Was he your number one choice out of all the candidates listed, Monty Williams, Mike Budenholzer, et cetera? And just what do you think he can bring to the table for the Sixers?
Yeah, Nick Nurse was my number one choice for the Sixers, and it's gotten me back in more than I expected. The thing that I'm most excited about is we have yet to see this Sixers core with Joel Embiid specifically and the pieces around him with a true X's and O's tactician like Nick Nurse is. There's always been more of a locker room guy, a motivator with Doc Rivers, and even Brett Brown was much more of a player's coach. Nick Nurse is truly cut from the basketball mindset. He gets in the mud, goes to the X and O's, very creative, very outside the box thinker, and I'm excited to see what that can bring out. Unlike Doc Rivers, who obviously has an impressive basketball resume in himself all the time coaching, Nick Nurse has much more of a diverse background in terms of he's coached overseas, had success in England, won 2 championships over there, coached in the G League and won 2 championships there. So to me, there's something to that, a guy who has won at different levels, and there's also different challenges that you can kind of come up with. He's run into the situation where maybe his best player in the offense just got pulled up to the NBA from the G League, and he's got to figure out what can his team do from that. I like how that kind of reinforces that creativity, thinking outside the box and finding new layers. So I expect that to be shown with this team, and I do think he's the right guy for the job. He won a championship his first year with Toronto. Those are obviously huge shoes to fill once again coming here, but he dealt with a similar situation with the Raptors of kind of trying to break their playoff demons. So I'm excited to see what he can bring.
Scotty, real quick, let me jump in here because some of the negative pushback we were seeing on social media from Sixers fans was kind of the load management thing, joking around about Joel Embiid, not being able to play in the playoffs because he's going to play on 45 minutes a night. And then also the fact that it's the same old, like Doc, not playing the younger guys, blah, blah, blah. But Scotty and I were having this conversation, like, OG Anunoby has played since day one, right? He's helped develop Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. Scotty Barnes has played since day one, rookie of the year, right? Is there any truth to what the skeptics or the Negadelphia crowd is saying? Or does Nick Nurse play the young guys and load manages?
Yeah, so there's a little of both. I'll start with like the core of young guys that he's dealt with. He absolutely is effective at developing. The guys you point out, Pascal Siakam's a guy like the harp on, where specifically I think Nurse deserves a ton of credit for his development. But he's not as much of like a just give a random guy a chance in the way I think people. Right, like if I'm Jaden Springer, I'm still probably a little nervous about how things shake out. But also I've gotten some pushback on my critiques of that from some Raptors fans on Twitter saying it was simply the hand that he was dealt, that there weren't really these guys itching for opportunities behind him. And to look at that, it's really like Malachi Flynn and Delonte Banton, who are the guys that didn't really get a chance there. And no disrespect to those guys, they're fine players, but they're not that like itching to make an impact. So it could be a case of he just hasn't really had those young guys looking over the shoulder in a different situation in Philly. He is going to play guys a ton of minutes, but also in fairness, like Nurse was effective when he had Kawhi Leonard with the load management and making sure that was the case. And Nurse talked about that in the press conference. So Joel Embiid is obviously in a little bit of a different category. Nurse is going to play guys a lot of minutes. I mean, Pascal Siakam has led the NBA in minutes per game the past 2 seasons. And 2 years ago, he was tied with Fred VanVleet for most minutes in the league. So his teammate there. So there is going to be a lot of that. I think Tyrese Maxey is probably going to be the guy that really sees an uptick in that. But overall, I'm okay with it. I'm not as worried about it as some people, but there's some truth for sure.
Yeah, I love what you said there at the end, because with Tyrese Maxey, he's a young guy, and this goes for all the young guys. You can run them until their legs are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's the point of having youth on your team and having energy. But you brought up some of you mentioned some takeaways from the press conference yesterday. What were some of your main takeaways from that introductory press conference with Nick Nurse yesterday?
I like that he I liked his mindset. He seemed very focused. He harped on the championship pedigree. Everyone did. Daryl Morey, Josh Harris as well. That was pointed out several times throughout. It seems like he has a plan going in with as far as the offensive innovation, an idea for what to do with Joel. He talked about getting Maxey and some more pick and roll sets, seeing what he can do as a playmaker, which is going to be something interesting to watch, and to me going to be a huge storyline for next season. So it felt like he was prepared. He got his first little taste of Philly media. Saw the pressure there. So overall, I was happy with him. I do think he is the man for the job, and I'm excited to see what actually computes on the court as far as the X's and O's.
Yeah, well, one of the guys he got to meet was the king, right? Howard Eskin. He asked him more specifically about this man I'm about to ask you about. Scotty and I have gone back and forth, towed this line for the last 2 weeks since the Sixers season ended. Are you leaning more towards bringing James Harden back, or are you okay with the idea of moving on from him and seeing what the alternative can be?
Yeah, it's tough. It's a loaded question there, and that's really the crossroads that the Sixers find themselves at. Truth be told, my personal position on it is I don't think James Harden is really the guy to take this team to a championship. But with that being said, there's really not better out there.
Right.
He's truly the best free agent on the market. And Kyrie Irving's really the only guy in that tier, and there's no clean route to him, and he sure comes with his own demons as well. So the smart decision is really to bring James Harden back. Where I get hung up on is, and to me what it completely boils down is, what is this length and what is this numbers looking at? That right. If he is locked in on a 4-year max, to me I say go hang out in Houston, go do your thing. If he can be talked into another 1 or 2 year deal where he is still kind of a short-term outlook, I'm happy with James Harden being back. As much as like he definitely has his issues, he has his things, but he did win 2 playoff games for the Sixers team. He's still a terrific playmaker, and he still has some juice in the tank. He's not like completely washed, but if there is like a 4-year max stable or let him walk, to me that's just too long and too many concerns that come with that. So I would not be willing for that.
Does the hire of Nick Nurse, does that intrigue of him with a new coach, maybe a coach he gets along better with than maybe he did with Doc Rivers, kind of pull you to say, let's run this back and see what he and Joel can do with a new coach?
Yeah, I think there's truth to that. I do definitely think the firing of Doc Rivers is the bigger storyline there. There didn't seem to be an eye-to-eye look there. Nick Nurse, I think, is pretty independent of the decision. I think it was a Mike D'Antoni edition that I would be more pointing towards that happening. I thought it was interesting that Nick Nurse said he talked to James Harden already.
Yeah,
that was a little surprising to me to hear. So I'm sure the Sixers are going to try. Like I said, there's not really a better option out there. So it is in their best interest to try and bring him back if they can find a way that works for both sides. But yeah, I think right now it's pretty independent, the coaching of what James Harden wants. And one of the things Nurse brought up in the press conference, which I'd like to hear as well, is the sell for James Harden wanting to come back is winning. This is his best opportunity at winning a championship. He's not really going to get that where he has that type of role anywhere else. So if that's what he wants, it's in Philadelphia. So it's up to him for what he really wants.
Love that. Yeah, that's a great point out from the press conference yesterday. He said a lot of interesting things about James Harden, which kind of reshaped my perception. But looking at Nick Nurse, once again, the addition, and then thinking in respect to Tobias Harris. Obviously, a lot of talk since the season ended. He had his ups and downs as usual, it seems, at this point in the postseason, throughout the regular season, of course. Is there any part of you that wants to see, Tobias Harris back with this team, with a new head coach, with Nick Nurse, see his fit with that? With Nick Nurse's scheme and game plan, or are you done with the Tobias situation here in Philadelphia? Is it time to get him out by any means necessary? And if so, what does a package like that look like? Where do you think his value is on the trade market with just 1 year left on that ridiculous contract at this point? What are your thoughts there, Sean?
So I'll start with this. If you put myself, Sean Bernard, as general manager of the Philadelphia 76ers right now, I would let James Harden walk, and I would play out the last year of Tobias Harris' contract. And the only reason I say that is that this now puts you going into next offseason with a full max slot and a little extra money to work with for free agents with a much better free agent class. I don't expect that to be the case because there's just too much pressure right now. Daryl Morey's back's against the
Coming on the
wall.
season.
Yeah, that's basically putting a punt on the season. I do think that would be the best route for the Sixers' long-term chances at winning a championship, and they have a much cleaner opportunity to bringing in a true championship roster like that. But like I said, I think there's too much at stake for the Sixers to actually make that decision. I do think it's incredibly likely that Tobias Harris is traded, and for the first time throughout the length of that deal, is he's now looked at as a positive trade asset. And why I say that is because it's the 1 year, $39.8 million left. Yeah, you can move it. And as much as Tobias is talked negatively about, he's not like an awful guy to have. Like, you can take him on your roster. He's fine. And you take him for one season and you essentially clear $40 million in cap space by letting him walk after that. So that is appealing for these teams that are looking to shave a little money, especially with the new CBA, which has a ton more penalties for the big spenders. So I do think Tobias is going to be looked at positively by teams around the league. He's also a guy that can set a culture for some of the younger teams.
Yeah.
If you look at like an Orlando Magic or Detroit Pistons, a team like that where it needs that kind of presence. So I do think he's traded. A couple kind of names that have popped out to me. The one that is stuck in my head, and shout out Mike Levin on the Rice Ricky Sanchez, who initially brought this up, but a Jordan Poole trade to me is very enticing. I do think the Sixers need a trade with some juice, and the Warriors are a prime candidate for a team looking to shave money, which Tobias would bring on. So there's something workable there. I also think a Buddy Hield type package with the Pacers is something that could work. There's a couple teams around, so I expect Daryl Morey to be working those margins, making some trades, and I don't expect Tobias to be in uniform next year.
So when you look back on this 2022-2023 season, obviously it was the same ending to the movie we've seen for the last, since the Joel Embiid era began, right? But we also had lots of conversations this year that, hey, this year was a lot of fun in the regular season. This probably was the best team of the Joel Embiid era, and they had the best chance to win a championship. What are some of your positive takeaways that you can take into next season from this season?
Yeah, I mean, Joel Embiid MVP to me is a big one, and I know people get sick of talking about it because the results were the same at the end of the season. But to me, I do think it's important. That was important to Joel. That was clearly a goal of his to be recognized for that, and I think that's cool. I think that's fine. I think players should want that. I don't think it should be criticism that he cares about an individual award like that. People should want to be the best at what they do. So shout out to Joel for getting that. And I also think that's a big deal when we look toward next season and Embiid being more willing to take load management days and things like that. I think it's big that he now has that trophy on his trophy case where he can look back at and he's not kind of gunning for it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think Tyrese Maxey took another huge leap this year. That to me is a big story. Next season, moving forward, that's going to be the biggest thing my eyes are on what exactly is his role, what can he do from here. But he has proved people wrong every step of the way. His ceiling is significantly higher than I think anyone gave him credit. And so, yeah, those are probably the two biggest things that jumped out. I'll rock those two as my two biggest positives.
I like that. It's almost like you knew our question lineup here because we're getting right into the Tyrese Maxey section of our questions here. So just generally speaking, what are your expectations for Maxey going into his fourth season with the Philadelphia 76ers? Obviously, there's extension talks that are going to go on as we look towards the future with this kid. But now under Nick Nurse specifically, where do you see Tyrese Maxey's role? What are your expectations for him this year? And then on the flip side of that, especially if James Harden does end up walking and going back to Houston.
Yeah, so I think a huge part of Maxey's role will be dictated by James Harden, whether he's here or not. Maxey, more than anyone else on this roster, is impacted by whether he's here or not and what his role looks like. For me, I'm excited to just look at still figuring out exactly what Tyrese Maxey is. Like Nick Nurse talked about putting him in some more pick and roll sets, seeing if he can be more of a creator. Can he become more of a traditional point guard and be a guy that can run an offense? For the time being, he is not that guy. He hasn't really shown those flashes as a passer. But like I mentioned, he's proved things wrong every step of the way. This is a guy who the knock on him coming out of college was that he wasn't a good enough shooter. Flash forward to 2 years in the NBA, and he was third in the NBA in three-point percentage. So he does have that clearly ability, the willingness to work, and I could see him proving wrong. Or maybe he isn't a point guard. Maybe that's not his role. Maybe his best outlook on a basketball court is a microwave scorer, and there's still absolutely a need for that. So that also kind of points to my taking a year off strategy of let's see what Tyrese Maxey really is and what he needs to be paired with to truly maximize this team. And as far as extension talks, one of the bigger storylines, and shout out Brian Tuparic, who I talked back and forth with about this, is the Sixers financially would benefit a great deal by pushing that extension off till next offseason. That's also a ton of trust between things. The bottom line is there should be no interest in letting Tyrese Maxey play in any other uniform ever. So if it's a make or break, you kind of got to swallow that. But I'm curious to see how that all plays out too.
Yeah, no, good point, man. But so to the Harden point, Scotty and I were actually having this conversation on, I believe, Wednesday's show. How do you kind of balance? What do you value more when it comes to that Harden Maxey relationship? Because it's tough. You're talking about the growth and development of Tyrese Maxey, and on one side, yes, when you take James Harden off the floor, it gives Tyrese Maxey, the ball more. It gives him more opportunities. It puts him in different situations, so it allows more for that growth. But then you also have to weigh the opposite side to play devil's advocate is the type of mentor that James Harden has been and can be to a young guy like Tyrese Maxey. I mean, I go back to when Harden was first brought here, still not playing, but on the bench in Milwaukee. And I remember Maxey was hesitant and Harden got up and said something day one, and their relationship kind of sparked from there. How do you weigh the mentorship and getting to learn from James Harden in person compared to taking off, the training wheels and moving on from Harden and letting him grow on his own?
Yeah, overall, I don't view Harden as holding Maxey back by any means. In fact, I think that Maxey has benefited from not having that playmaking role, that he's truly only been out there to go get buckets and score. That's what he's proven to be best at so far. So I think, but on the other hand, like if the goal is to make him a true point guard, he's got to learn how to make those decisions. So I personally lean toward the opposite, that I think you can find enough guys as just fine point guards to run an offense. And even you look around the NBA, like the Malcolm Brogdon type, the Mike Conley type, not that that's the answer to the Sixers championship problem, but my point being that you can find a guy to do that if Maxey can't. His best asset as a scorer. And to me, I can continue to harp on that. So I think it's pretty independent of the Harden. I don't think it's held him back by any means. But yeah, I'm curious. Like I said, him more than anyone is impacted by this, but it's more of a role of what exactly is he doing on the offense. I think he's going to be effective regardless.
He left a name off that point guard list, Scotty.
Yeah, interesting enough. And we can get right into it now. So you mentioned some point guards that come to mind as far as maybe filling in that playmaker, that facilitator role if James Harden was to leave. Looking at viable candidates, obviously Fred VanVleet has been in the headlines lately. He was talking about Nick Nurse, obviously, as soon as Nick Nurse was given this head coaching job with the Sixers. Do you have any interest in Fred VanVleet? Is that a realistic option to look at if you're a Sixers fan in the very early stages of the offseason here? And if not Fred VanVleet, is there any other names that come to mind, whether free agents or somebody that you think is a viable candidate for the Sixers to go after as a kind of a consolation prize if James Harden does walk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like Fred VanVleet, and I've seen this swirling around a decent bit. He kind of stirred the pot with his comments about it, praising Nick Nurse and everything that went along with that. I do think Fred VanVleet's a pretty solid replacement for James Harden. There's obviously going to be some sort of downgrade, assuming that he walks. And the other thing that I didn't mention with the James Harden replacement stuff is the Sixers also won't get much cap relief that he leaves. That they're going to be working with about $12 million total, not the max semi-max slot that Harden soaks up. So they kind of got to look through the trade market a little bit. I think VanVleet's better than a lot of people give him credit for. I've been a Fred VanVleet guy for a while, liked him since college, since the Wichita State days. I think he's fallen into a role that was slightly too big for him in Toronto, where he was looked at as like kind of the guy for extensions, him and Pascal Siakam. That's not where he's best at. He's definitely more of a complementary piece. So I think he would benefit from having a little bit less of an offensive role. The other thing, I mean, the size isn't ideal if you have a backcourt of VanVleet and Maxey, but I think both those guys have become better defenders than their reputation stays. Maxey, I think specifically deserves a ton of credit for his growth on the defensive end last year, and VanVleet is just a pesky defender. He's got good hands. He competes. So while he is small and having both your guards under 6'2" isn't ideal, both these guys compete. They're both pretty sneaky, competitive, and effective on the defensive end. So I wouldn't be as worried about that as a lot of people. There is going to be a step back if it's not James Harden, but I think Fred VanVleet's a good name and would make sense.
If there's one thing that I've learned that I think Scotty's learned and we've talked about on the show since the season ended and watching this watching the NBA playoffs continue is like you got to take the paper out of it. You got to take the name on the paper out of it, right? And like I think people overreact to this Fred VanVleet conversation so much, where like no one's saying Fred VanVleet is a greater talent than James Harden individually. But sometimes fit matters and age matters and what you need. And how do you view Daryl Morey's roster construction moving forward when you talk about maybe a Fred VanVleet type over a James Harden, when you talk about moving Tobias Harris and maybe having 2 or 3 more depth pieces that can contribute, like when you watch Miami play, compared to the name piece that is Tobias Harris? Do you kind of view this as I need more pieces than an individual name, or what are you looking at with this roster?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think there's a little bit of a swing back across the NBA right now, where we've been through this like big 3 era and superstar era, where it was built around like catering to these superstars and getting that select small pool of players and then filling in the gaps from there. We're now seeing more of like a team construction, and both these teams in the finals, you can see that with the Nuggets and the Heat. Neither of these teams have skipped any steps in building up their rosters. So I think that's something that's kind of cool across the league. The Sixers should be right in that same mold, trying to fill that. And they have been a team falling victim to star hunting in the past and trying to seek that big name. Personally, my biggest fear with the Morey roster construction is I do worry that James Harden is his one kind of blind spot with, we know the backstory, we know the relationship, how long that they've been together, everything. So that is going to be kind of the make or break decision. I get it from both sides if he does come back, but I do think that there is a weight to the point that like that money could be better served spread across a couple guys who can each make an impact rather than that quote unquote like one superstar.
Yeah, that's an interesting answer, and it makes a lot of sense. I think that's where me and Dylan we've gotten to watch the rest of this postseason very closely. You see guys like Caleb Martin, Derek White. These are guys that are just these are guys that have came out of nowhere in a sense, right? Derek White's a little different. He was always a pretty solid player, but he definitely elevated his play with Boston. But there's been a bunch of guys throughout the playoffs this season that have just impressed. As far as
look at Bruce Brown, like Bruce Brown was
Aaron Gordon.
I never thought of Bruce Brown as a contributing piece on a championship contender as much as he is in Denver.
And now he looks like the perfect cog, right?
Yeah, he looks like one of the best 6-man in the league.
Exactly. Staying on that page, this is the final question that I have for you here, Sean. Speaking of the Denver Nuggets, speaking of Nikola Jokic, you mentioned Embiid winning the MVP this season. How ironic is it that it looks like the Denver Nuggets are going to win the NBA championship the year that Joel Embiid finally gets over that hump and wins his first MVP? And what does this mean in regards to Joel Embiid if Nikola Jokic is able to complete this postseason run with a Finals MVP, with an NBA championship? Is that conversation over, Sean? Is it already over, given he had a triple-double in his first game last night?
Yeah, I mean, it sucks. I'm not going to sit here. I've been a guy has dug in with my heels as anyone that Joel Embiid is the best center in the NBA, and I don't think I can look myself in the mirror and honestly say that. I mean, I've always stood that my point being that I did not think Jokic could be on a championship team because of the defense. I thought the lack of rim protection that he doesn't bring to the team is too big of a hole. And you look traditionally, you can't find an NBA team without high-level rim protection that has won a championship in the past decade, even if it is just Kevon Looney and Draymond Green with the Warriors or Tristan Thompson and LeBron with the Cavs. There's always been like that kind of presence, and the Nuggets don't have that, but that's clearly isn't mattering. And Jokic specifically has proven to be so effective offensively and so efficient in his decision-making that it is worth that trade-off. And on the counter side, I think how Joel went out this offseason or in these playoffs, those final 2 games.
It matters.
It matters. Yeah. Like that still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And I still remember that. So it is interesting to see Joel kind of go from the highest of the highs and getting crowned that MVP to the lowest of the lows to really the first time he's being held against the flame and catching blame for this postseason exit. And I mean, there's plenty of excuse if you want to find him. I do think the knee is worse than has been given credit. That is like a 4 to 6 week injury that he came back into and played through. And Joel never looked like he truly had it in those games. Even in his better games in the playoffs, it felt like he was kind of forcing his way to that. So, I mean, it sucks. There's no way around it. Jokic is obviously doing his thing, and it's impressive stuff at the highest level. So we do kind of roll over and give him that one right now, unfortunately.
I'll
Yeah.
say the conversation is on hold, Scotty. It's
Yeah.
not over, but it's definitely on hold. It's on layaway right now. Does it
Hey,
annoy the two
yeah.
of you? Like, listen, it's not taking anything away from Jokic's playmaking, his passing, his vision, his IQ. Everything is ridiculous. And watching him last night in this playoff run, he is as good as advertised. And, we probably some Sixers fans shouldn't have knocked him the way that they were trying to knock him to build and beat up. But does it annoy you guys? And it makes no sense because the Sixers were somehow the best team in 3-point field goal percentage. So it seems like everybody's taking their shots. But when you watch him kick out to Bruce Brown and Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray and KCP and all these role players, and it just feels like every time he makes that pass, it's a knockdown three. Yeah. And when Embiid, kicks it out, it's a brick. Like that doesn't annoy you guys. Like that part bothers me because him and Joel are neck and neck. He's got the lead right now, but it's like, man, I know the Sixers might have the more, like we talked about, the names on paper. They might have the more star power on their roster, but Denver's roster is much better.
Oh, yeah. Denver has done a terrific job filling in the gaps that Jokic can't fill. Even additions of guys like Aaron Gordon, who has really struggled to find an identity throughout his NBA career, giving him the role of just be a defensive nightmare, be a good cutter, and just do these off-ball things. He's thriving in it, and that's been a perfect compliment to Jokic. And then you look around the Michael Porter Jr.'s, the Kentavious Caldwell-Popes, and even Jamal Murray. Like, Jamal Murray should not go unforgotten in these conversations. No. He's been terrific.
No more Bubble Murray.
Yeah, for real. Like, do the Sixers win a championship with Jamal Murray? I mean, maybe, But, I do think there's some truth. It is a credit to the Nuggets for piecing things together. And Murray is like a true co-star. There's been moments where he's taken over completely in these playoffs. So the Nuggets have done a great job constructing that roster, and they're reaping the benefits for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. Scotty, anything else Sixers or NBA Finals related for Sean?
No, man. I guess just thinking towards the offseason, is there any number one goal this offseason for you, for the Sixers?
Yeah, I mean, more athletes is probably the biggest thing. I'm curious. We've seen Nick Nurse do a ton with that. We're gonna find out how much that was his preference versus kind of the cards that he would dealt in Toronto with as far as the roster construction, because these Sixers are just vastly different than the Raptors in that regard. I'm still kind of putting my priorities on hold until I see how this Harden thing shakes out. To me, that is the crossroads the Sixers find themselves in, and their direction from there will be drastically different one way or another. So I'm kind of sitting back, seeing how that comes out, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, actually, I do have one more question for you. Timing is going to matter over the next month or so. Obviously, free agency begins on June 30th at the end of this month. You're talking about having to wait for the Harden situation to play out. You're talking about if you trade Tobias Harris, if it's to open up cap space and not just bring in X, Y, and Z role players to fill those voids. You're talking about needing that done probably prior to the June 30th date or right on that date, because you can't allow that to get deep into free agency because whoever you want is not going to be available. How much does timing matter for Daryl Morey this offseason? And when do you kind of see this schedule playing out in terms of a possible Tobias trade, knowing what Harden's going to do, et cetera?
Yeah, the Harden thing will be first. And I know Daryl Morey talked about at the press conference that they couldn't have those conversations yet. My understanding of the rules is that is just false. And that was a GM speak, that you absolutely can. He's a Sixers player. This isn't some random free agent. You absolutely can have whatever conversations you want to have. So I'm sure there's been some communication to this point, especially if Nick Nurse is talking about that he's spoken to James Harden.
Right.
There's definitely some communication there. That's going to be the first thing that I believe is settled. And I do think it will be within probably the next 2 weeks would be my guess of when there's some sort of decision maker, at least behind closed doors, that there's some sort of indication of what his plans are, what his priorities are, and what the outlook is from there. I think once that James Harden decision is made, that's when it will be the true start to the Sixers offseason. What do they do? Where do they pieces? Where do the pieces fall? I think Tobias is likely to get traded regardless, but I think it increases if Harden's back for the money reasons. So yeah, I for now, I think it's wait and see what the Beard's doing and see where things go from there.
All right. Perfect. Guys, don't forget, check him out on Twitter at Sean_Barnard1. Check out his work with Fox Sports The Gambler and Philly Sports Network. Sean, appreciate you coming on this early Friday morning, man. Go enjoy your weekend.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you guys for having me anytime.
Appreciate
Happy Friday, Sean.
Good stuff, Scotty. Now, hold on, a little bit of work to do. Fix. Bang. We're back. live here on a Friday morning. Guys, don't forget the Phaithful Fanatic Show, as always, is brought to you by our friends over at Manscaped. Let them know that your friends at DSM sent you by using our promo code DSM at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Again, that is promo code DSM at checkout for 20% off your total order plus free shipping. Your balls will certainly thank you. Scotty, a lot of takeaways, a lot of positive takeaways from the Sean interview. How does hearing someone, obviously, you and I follow the Sixers very closely and we talk about them here daily on the pod, but obviously someone as kind of plugged in as Sean, someone who follows them just as closely as we do. How does someone like that talking positively about the future, not the future of this team, but kind of brushing off that ending of last season make you feel moving forward?
Yeah, I think for me, it just let me know he has had the proper time to kind of digest and get over
heal, right?
that miserable loss in the second round again. Because at the end of the day, Dylan, I think, it can get really misconstrued each and every year when you're ending in the same spot. But the point is that spot is in the second round of the playoffs. Like, that is a pretty deep play into the playoffs when you're going to a game 7 in the second round. And really seconds away from going to the Eastern Conference Finals. So, like, while it's painful, it hurts every single time the same way. It always hurts, probably a little bit more each time that it happens.
Yeah.
It only hurts because you're getting that far and you're having that opportunity right in your grasp, and then it falls out. So, like, to think that it's doom and gloom for the Sixers when you have Joel Embiid, when you have Tyrese Maxey under contract, these are two guys that have star talent. You have James Harden. He hasn't opted out yet. He hasn't said that he's walking yet. Everything has been rumors. So from that standpoint, you bring in a Nick Nurse, a guy that is highly renowned, obviously, around the league. I think there's a way you can look at this in a positive light. It's just hard if you're not over that playoff loss. And it's hard to be over it when you're still watching two teams play here in the NBA Finals. But I do agree with you. I think it was a very positive outlook overall from Sean, and somebody who I would say is not afraid to give you the doom and gloom perspective.
Sure,
like, we'll tell you how it is, and he was pretty positive in that.
Right. Not just the total fanboy and everything's going to be okay.
Exactly.
Rainbows. But for right now, the time being, you do kind of have to take that deep breath, man, and relax and just kind of see where they can push moving forward. Like, Scotty, if we have issues, like, think about what Boston has to deal with right now.
They got to make decisions.
Head coach, their duo, you breaking them up? Are you giving, are they both getting $300 million supermaxes?
Keeping Al Horford.
Milwaukee, they have decisions to make. They just filled their head coaching vacancy with a first timer, right? With an assistant. Chris Middleton, what's the plan with him? Brooke Lopez.
Is Drew gonna retire? He's talked about it.
So the top of the East, and obviously I know Miami's playing right now, so you would assume Miami's in this conversation.
They got a bunch of free agents too, though.
Yeah. So if with every team, every contender in the East has decisions to make this offseason, as do the Sixers. I kind of want to talk to you about the Nick Nurse introductory press conference a little bit before we wrap up this show. I loved it, man. It got me so re-energized for the upcoming season and for the off season, right? To see what kind of he and Daryl Morey can put together, because he'll obviously have his input on who comes to Philadelphia and who is and who he wants to coach, and etc. But I'm one of the questions you had asked me, or we discussed a couple of days ago, was kind of, how does he handle this media? And does the personality, does the way he's spoken to Toronto media and, some of the blame game that he's portrayed to the public, kind of, how does that play here? I thought he was great, dude. Like, I thought, like, obviously during the highs and lows of what is a regular season, there's going to be emotion involved in press conferences and things might be said or not said, that we'll get into in the moment. But for the time being, like, his confidence, his tone, his demeanor, his energy, I thought it was great. He, talking over and over again about how humble and enthused he is to be the 76ers head coach, how it was a fairly easy decision to make over the likes of Phoenix and Milwaukee with their vacancies at the time. What did you make of his press conference?
Yeah, I thought it was outstanding as well, man. The thing that stuck out to me was while everybody is so down on ownership, and understandably, I get it, right? This is Josh Harris. He owns the Commanders, the Devils, in New Jersey. Like, he's all over the place. But at the end of the day, he is willing to put the money into the team, man. And that's what it comes down to. He was able to give Daryl Morey those resources to go out and get Nick Nurse, even after we still have Doc locked in a contract of guaranteed funds, right? So I think just the way he spoke so highly of ownership and Daryl Morey, I don't think you get Nick Nurse here without Daryl Morey, obviously.
Absolutely.
But then also without Josh Harris giving that approval and giving the money to get him. So I thought that was the first interesting point. But to your point about, just his conversation about communication with the players and how that's going to be number one. I'm pretty sure I'm not sure if you've seen the video that went around of him talking about Kyle Lowry and their first playoff game in 2019 against Orlando Magic.
No.
So he was at like some type of convention. He was doing an interview in front of a crowd, and he ultimately was talking about the first game in that playoff run for them to win the championship in 2019. They were playing the Orlando Magic, and they lose that first game to Orlando. And Kyle Lowry scores 0 points. And he talks about how Kyle Lowry had his playoff struggles up until that point. He just couldn't get over that hump of playing well in the playoffs. The Toronto Raptors couldn't get over that hump. And he talks about how he went to Kyle Lowry after that game and he said, look, you're making a lot of money. I'm making a lot of money. We got to go out here and lead this team to victories. It's got to be us that does it. So what we're going to do, we're going to go into this film session and I'm going to give it to you. And I think that type of authenticity, that type of transparency is going to be huge for this team because it's exactly what the Sixers need. I don't know what Doc Rivers is like because he didn't disclose that to us as much, but it seems like Doc Rivers was a player's coach, but more of a pushover and an enabler of players to do whatever the hell they want. And I think just a little bit of, a tush push or a kick in the ass from Nick Nurse every once in a while is going to do this team some justice. You have Embiid out there, right? At the end of game 6, doesn't touch the ball. If Nick Nurse comes out after that game and says it doesn't matter whose fault it is, Embiid's got to touch the ball. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
No,
There's nothing wrong with putting that out into the universe, and I think it's a good thing ultimately. It can get bad if you do stuff behind people's backs. Go to the public.
Absolutely,
first.
and here's the thing: I need the grown men in the room to be grown men, okay? And listen, I'm not familiar with the comments, whatever comments he made to the media in public about former players at that time and during his tenure in Toronto. I'm not sure what was said. Kind of the tone in which he said it, the fact that he did not speak with the player before, whatever the case is. But I need the grown men in the room to be grown men because there is a difference from a coach throwing you under the bus and accountability. And accountability has been something that the Philadelphia 76ers have struggled with from top to bottom over the last couple of seasons. And if you are a guy like Joel Embiid, who seems like Mr. Accountable, who is willing to name call teammates out after bad losses and bad performances, which I'm not saying is a wrong thing. He needs to be able to take it on the chin as well and lead by example. So if Tyrese Maxey has a bad game and Nick Nurse says something about Tyrese Maxey in the media, Tyrese Maxey doesn't take it in a negative way. If a coach comes out and wrongly throws a player under the bus or is harping at this one player or a group of players, blah, 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 that is a negative look, okay? But holding a player accountable is completely different. And if these dudes, these grown men, right, that are going to make $100 or $200 million can't take some criticism on the chin, I don't know what to tell you, bro. Like,
the writing will be on the wall.
I don't know what he said in Toronto. I don't know how bad it was, if he really threw somebody under the bus and that's how he lost the locker room, or he just quite literally held someone accountable, but he didn't run it by the team first.
Right.
Hey, you play for him, fellas. He don't play for you, play for him. So if coach wants to say something to people, you're going to receive that message, and then you guys can talk about it afterwards like grown men. That's what I
Yeah.
loved about his press conference as well. He was asked about the Joel dispute and the back and forth and to the media conversations that Joel had about Nick Nurse. He laughed at it.
Yeah.
It's a sense of respect. Yeah, dude, who cares? You bitched and moaned about each other.
Exactly.
You bitched about foul calls, and Bede made fun of you in the media. The ultimate goal is that you can make him better, and he makes your life easier as a head coach. Figure it out. Let's go win a title. That's the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Oh,
I think the other side of it too is just like the X and O's part of it. You just never got anything like that from Doc Rivers to explain, from just him talking about Embiid, right? He talked about Embiid in this introductory press conference, talks about his plans for Embiid and how he wants to use him and how he wants to make him better at playmaking and how he can use him in the offense and put him in the best positions possible. And obviously his defensive capabilities. Talked about Maxey, what he can do with Maxey. He can run him in more pick and rolls, get him more open looks, put him in better positions to be a playmaker and get him better in that area. And then even James Harden, the fact that he's already talked to Embiid, he's already talked to James Harden before coming into this situation. He has open lines of communication. And he talked about Harden and how he benefits this team. And I think what he said about Harden and kind of how he approached that question from Howard Eskin, I think it brought me back down to earth. It very much simplified it. Like, if Harden wants to win, then you know where he can do that at. And it's going to be the Philadelphia 76ers. Sure. You can do sign-in trades to the Clippers. You can do sign-in trades to the Phoenix Suns, whatever. That's a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of, partnering with other teams to benefit the Sixers in that case. It's not going to happen. And so in that case, it comes back down to the point where you got to make this contract work for obviously James Harden, but it's also got to work for the Sixers in their future. So where I'm at with that Harden conversation, I think I've come to a point with it. Harden on a 2 or 3 year deal, period. It can be a max deal, but Harden on a 2 or 3 year deal, bringing him back to the Sixers is what I would ultimately say I want for this team. Obviously, you don't want the 4 year max deal that's going to cripple you 2 years down the line. But if you get a 2 or 3 year deal with the third year being an opt-out or an opt-in for the player or the team, whatever the case may be, then I think that's probably best case scenario.
You know what's so funny to me? It's like why he has to opt out. He's got, like, I know it's for the money, but like James, like, you wanted to help the team out last year. Like, you took a lesser 2 year deal, obviously with the option, right? And probably the intention of opting out after this year, depending on what happened. But like, you couldn't opt in for the 40 mil, the 39 mil this year with a 2 year extension for the max. Like, that would be 3 more years of James Harden, 40 mil this year, and then whatever it would go to, 50 whatever
million in the next 2 years. God forbid. And he has a wine company, he has his own shoe. Like, run it up with the Uno character up in Philadelphia, right? Like
I love how it's like Harden's opting out because he wants the max now. Why don't you opt back in and get the 2 year extension for the max? Like, but what? That's just the team friendly version of me.
Like, back up on that pedestal with his performance. I mean, he finished, like you said, 8th in MVP.
Well, that's nothing. If you want to get back in the good graces of this fan base, you might like listen. If you're gonna hold the Sixers basically hostage almost. And take this down to the wire to the start of free agency and end up pulling away with a 4 year max contract. And then you're going to perform in any way or fashion of what you just put out on the table in game 7 and, the other 4 games of the second round. This fan base is not going to be welcoming the James Harden for the next 4 years.
That is actually a great point, Dylan, because I haven't even gotten that far in the thought process, but him signing back after all this smoke this whole season, the way the season floundered out, it's gonna have a lot of pressure on his back for sure. But that's what comes with winning and the want.
Scotty, think about how lucky James Harden is that Joel Embiid choked in game 7 as well.
Yeah, literally.
Like,
he's very lucky.
Think about how this looks for him, how this fan base perceives him even more differently if Embiid drops 32 efficiently in a game 7, but Harden scores 9 with 5 or 6 turnovers and they lose game 7.
Yeah.
Think about that. And
It's
there's no
insane,
criticism on Joel. It's all on James. You
It's
think
just
this is even a conversation? Because I promise you, if
crazy.
if that had played out, it really would have been same ending to the movie because Joel has shown up in other playoff series.
Yeah.
So if he had if his Robin, right, if his running mate was the reason they lost game 7 like that, oh, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No.
The conversation would be James Harden is not welcome back to Philadelphia. Go get me someone else that you compare with Joel Embiid, right?
Yeah.
The fact that Embiid's flame kind of burned out at the same time, allowing him to take a decent amount of that responsibility off of Harden's shoulders, because Embiid ultimately is the number 1 on this team. It allows Harden to have a little more wiggle room within this contract dispute because it's like, hey,
absolutely,
big fella didn't show up either.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
That's a great point as well, man. The Joel Embiid flounder out took a ton of attention off of James Harden, even a ton of pressure in a sense. Because like you said, that the world would be on fire for Harden right now if that happened and it was only his fault, right?
Yeah. Think about that. After all the Ben collapses and after all the backup 5 issues, like the season against Toronto when Joel with Joel off the floor, we were a minus 89 or whatever in a few minutes, right? With Greg Monroe and Boban and Amir Johnson and blah, blah, blah. You have all these issues. Now imagine if it just happens again, but with James Harden wanting a max.
Exactly.
Instead, you got 15-point, severely inefficient Joel Embiid on the same night, and it allows some blame to kind of be evenly distributed around.
Exactly, man. Look, what I would say ultimately I don't know if you want to put a bow on this conversation, but as far as the Sixers and, obviously it's going to be a tumultuous regular season next season, no matter what. Like we're going to be begging for the playoffs because that's all that really matters. And that's really what mattered this season as well. Like, I think we just didn't acknowledge it because the team did look significantly better than they had in the past. And, hopefully that's the case again next year, but it's going to be all about the playoffs. What I would say to just repossess a little bit of hope for this Sixers team is look at the Denver Nuggets, man. Like, look at how we talked about Jokic the last 2 seasons after he wins MVP and he goes out in the second round or even the first round of the playoffs, right? And look what they've been able to do. I know he's hurt, but look what they've been able to do this season by turning. I don't even want to say turning this team around. They've been a good team the last few years.
They're riding it out. Right. They're riding it out and they're fixing the holes. They're filling those gaps.
You bring in a Bruce Brown. Maybe that's the difference. Bruce Brown and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope added to this team is the difference between becoming the most efficient team in NBA basketball.
And allowing Jokic and Murray to continue to learn from their pain, from their playoff woes, right? And listen, as a fan, trust me, guys, like I'm 100% with you. Like it's tiring, it's exhausting to go through this for 5-6 years now, right? Like at what point do we finally get over this hump? Like Denver's had a Western Conference Finals appearance before this championship run. So it is a little bit different, but yes, I mean, the 2 years that Jokic won MVP, they were a first and second round exit.
Yeah.
So like that's the only thing, that's the only saving grace I can kind of give you is like, you have to continue to allow him to learn from this and hope that it builds him stronger moving forward. And again, like I'm tired of the excuses as well. It is frustrating year after year that he's hurt. Sean alluded to it, man. The dude had a grade 2, what was it, an LCL tear?
LCL, yeah.
And he came back like I'm not making excuses for how he played, but I'm making an excuse for how he played a little bit, if that makes sense. Like that wasn't fully healthy MVP Joel Embiid that scored 15 points.
Exactly.
It just wasn't. And if you want to argue me and say that doesn't matter, that's your right. But if you want me to like find the X-ray or the MRI, I can pull up the photo for you.
And I think since
absolutely, man. What's up,
looking
Jeremy?
at Embiid and you look at Jokic once again, I hate to keep comparing them, but it is just a learning lesson, I think, for us and for Embiid and kind of where he needs to go to get his game to the next level. Obviously, it's one, staying healthy. I think you do that by taking some of the usage off in the regular season. We've discussed this already, but just take some of that wear and tear off of Embiid during the regular season. Maybe he doesn't need to average 30 points. Maybe he can just average 26, 27, right? Like it doesn't need to be that centrally focused.
But think about some of those performances, man. Think about a night in January where they're in overtime against Charlotte on the road and Embiid's got 44.
Yeah.
It shouldn't take 44. That is an indictment on his teammates.
Yeah.
That is an indictment on the rest of the Sixers.
We enjoy it in the moment, but it's an indictment on the rest of his teammates.
Yeah, like 100%.
I would also say just what my mom said up here in the comments, his fitness. I think that goes along with the injury and the usage during the regular season and keeping himself in shape.
You know what's funny?
Just take an off season, go train in Denver. Literally, get your lungs right, get your body right, man. But
you know what's funny? Like, did you remember like the rumors? Like they taught him how to fall. Like they coached him up how to fall because so he's not like hurting himself every time he hits the floor. I feel like I watched him hit the floor more this year than his entire career combined. Like I feel like he learned that, and like just in the back of his mind, it's like repetition now. Like that's another thing, bro. Stay upright. Like I know, like you learned how to fall properly. Well, you fell one too many times against the Nets, and you tore your knee up. So like, play properly.
That is one of my biggest hopes. I think I told you this before. It's not that I want them to stop getting foul calls or stop getting to the free throw line. It's not like that. But I'm hoping that Nick Nurse can instill some toughness finishing at the rim for these guys, right? That has been one of my biggest pet peeves over the last 2 seasons, especially since Harden got here, is the unwillingness to go up strong and finish through contact. Just go up and get the contact. Don't try to sell it. Go up and try to finish, and you'll get the contact, man.
I know he's hardwired this way, and I know it's difficult, especially in the moment competing, to try to tell athletes and these competitors to play differently and think differently about how they're going to use their bodies. But go back to the play he was injured against the Nets. I don't recall the score, but I want to say we were up by a decent amount at that point when he fell under the rim and tripped over, I believe it was Cam Johnson, and, tore his knee up on that specific play. He was going for a chase down block at the rim. There's no need for it, dude. At the end of the game, go for the block. Joel, man, when you're up 16, I don't need you using reckless abandonment, as Jim Lynam likes to say, and that's how he's hard. I don't care. Change it. Fix the wiring then, because I don't need you going up for a poster of a block off the backboard for a pin down.
I agree.
Because, like, it's just so unnecessary. Again, I don't know what the score was in that moment. I forget now. I mean, you ended up sweeping the net. Like, you didn't even do that, man. And look what happens. Like, well, that's why we love Joel. He plays with reckless abandonment. No, that's not why I love Joel. I love Joel because he's uber talented when he's on the floor. So how about we keep him 100% on the floor?
Yeah, I agree, man. I agree with you. Everything you said there.
In that situation,
I think it all feeds into itself. It all feeds into itself. Losing weight, getting in better shape, right? All of it feeds into
and I would say this as well, to your point, like facing the Nets, there's no need for him to play 40+ minutes. There's no need for him to play, 44 minutes against the Rockets. I remember the first game, Harden came back and they lost against the Rockets in like double overtime.
Yeah.
Embiid fouled out. He played like 43 minutes. Like, there's just no need for that, dude.
Okay to concede that game in a sense.
Here's the thing. You mentioned it earlier, kind of like not just load management and nights off and having a plan for Joel Embiid. Scotty, Nick Nurse's offense, you can give Joel rest with him on the floor.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Yeah. Like, he's still going to be competing. He's going to be running up and down. He's going to be playing hard on defense. But in terms of being the focal point of the offense and pounding the ball through the floor and ISO and pick and roll and this and that, in a new offense with different X's and O's, maybe he doesn't touch the ball nearly as much. Maybe he's not averaging 33 because he's not getting the attempts from before. Maybe that's what he and the Sixers need.
And see, that's how you avoid those game 6 meltdowns, right? At the end of the game where Embiid's just exhausted, right? Settling for a mid-range jump shot at the elbow. I think that's a lot of what's going to get fixed here is he's going to have energy at the end of these games. And now he can go to the post and do what he needs to do down there in the paint. I think we saw that against the Celtics, just him getting sort of exhausted in a sense, right? Just through the usage, you have to go up to the – just think about it. This is a 7'2", 280-pound man, right? Full of body mass.
Think about what his joints are like, bro.
Exactly. And you're talking about him starting every offensive possession with the ball out by the three-point line. So now, not only does Embiid have to figure out how to score for this Sixers team because they can't score without him doing it because they just don't know how to at this point. So every time he catches the ball up at the three-point line, has to square up Al Horford, then take him to the post out by the elbow in the free throw line, and then work his way from there to get whatever shot he's looking for. That right there is the problem. He's already working too hard because just on that one possession.
And this is an indictment.
Possession after possession.
This is an indictment on the rest of the guys on the floor and the head coach at the time.
Head coach. Yeah.
If you can't, if you want Joel to get the ball at a spot, right? If his mark is on the wing, 4 feet from the block, if that's where you want to get him, right? And it's working. But then Boston's chess matches, Boston takes that away. They're making it difficult for him to get the ball there. He has to come out to the elbow or higher to get the ball.
Right.
Well, maybe the chess match should continue and you build something else in the offense off of that denial.
Yeah.
So just because Joel can't get the ball at his spot doesn't mean we need to force Joel getting the ball at the elbow. How about if Boston's doing whatever they can to take that away, they're leaning one way, they're sending a help, they're sending a double team.
Yeah.
How about you draw something else up for someone else on the opposite corner or pin down? Like, it's not rocket science, man. The Sixers offense never changed. If Joel wanted the ball here, but he had to get it over there, they were still forcing the ball to him over there because that's all they know. He has to touch the ball every time. And I'm a firm believer in that your best player should touch the ball often. And when the game's on the line, I mean, damn it, he should touch the ball almost every time down the floor in the last 2 minutes or so with the game on the line. But I mean, dude, in the second quarter, if a defense takes him off his spot and they're sending help, draw something else up on the opposite side of the floor for another playmaker.
It's unreal when you think about it. And I know we gave Doc a lot of credit last season, but when you really think about it, like a guy like Tyrese Maxey, who is so quick, we just never see him on a backdoor cut.
Just stay in the corner.
Like, that makes zero sense. Makes zero sense, man. I like what Chili said there, just about guys cutting. I think Nick Nurse, obviously, I think any competent head coach does that, has their guys cutting. And you talk about, I think I'm going to get to what you want to say with that comment, because the other side of that is personnel. And when you look at the Denver Nuggets, when Jokic is hitting a cutting Aaron Gordon just goes up and dunks the ball, right? You don't have that with Tobias. He can, for whatever reason, can't finish at the rim. You don't have it with PJ Tucker. We know what he brings to the table. He can't dunk. So you look at these situations, and it's personnel with the Sixers as well. It's not just Doc. But you need guys that can finish at the rim as well.
That's a great point. But I was going to take it from watching last night because he brought up Jokic getting assists off all the off-ball movement and the cutting.
Yeah.
I watched the Miami Heat run a play last night.
Yeah.
That I could never in a million light years
imagine the Sixers running.
Scotty, this play, it ended with a Hayward Highsmith bounce pass at the rim for an open dunk.
Yeah.
There was about 5 or 6 passes in it. It started on the right wing. There was a screen, come around the screen, pocket pass, pick and roll, another off-ball screen in the corner, bounce pass off that roller. Defender comes over, around him to Hayward Highsmith, dunk. It was poetry in motion, and I could never picture the 76ers drawing something up like that under Doc Rivers. Now, does Nick Nurse bring creativity like that? I sure as hell hope so.
Yeah.
Because, dude.
Easy buckets. It's a great point, man. That's what it comes down to. Getting the offense easy buckets so they're not working so hard to get every single bucket, every possession. Yeah. I can't wait.
And listen, listen, dude, here's the thing. When you watch these two teams that are in the finals playing, it's like, yeah, they play, their centers are stylistically different than Joel, right? They do different things on the floor. They're both probably better passers and ball handlers with the ball than Joel is, right? And Joel's a better scorer. But both teams, like Jokic is the center. He's the best player on his team. Bam's the center. He's the second best player on his team, and he touches the ball a lot.
A lot.
So both teams' centers are almost the focal points of their offense, as is the Sixers center.
Yeah.
But both teams' offenses are run completely different than the Sixers' offenses run.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Like, it's almost like Doc Rivers he's like been coaching the Sixers but took 3 years off from coaching. Like, he just give the ball to Joel Embiid. Let's go out here and get wins.
2010 team again.
Just get the ball to Embiid. Harden, you want to shoot a step back three, feel free. Let's run that pick and roll at the end of the game 20 times, and that'll be all we do.
No, except when the pick and roll does work, they just don't run it for a quarter.
Then we'll just go away from that. We'll go to Embiid ISOs, Harden ISOs.
Doc is out of here. Game 7 is behind us. One last Nick Nurse point that I wanted to bring up, because I did hear a lot of this on the radio yesterday after his presser. And he talked about moving forward and the pass is the past and leaving it back there behind you. And how it's a clean slate. And listen, I love the thought process of that mentality. It is essentially a clean slate for Nick Nurse coming to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a difficult task selling this fan base.
Yeah.
On the past is the past and we're building towards the future. Because, the past is the past, but it's been the same past over and over and over again for us here, and we're still here. You're new here. So it is now your job to help us get beyond that past and beyond the hurt and the pain and move forward. But it's very difficult to try to sell the Sixers fan base on leave that behind you and let's push forward.
I will say, no, and I agree with your point, and I'm not sure what they were saying on the radio, but I do agree with the overall point there. What I will say is that he did also, at the same sense, mention that he's going to face that head on, right? Like he's going to go into this situation, if Embiid is struggling in the play. He didn't say Embiid specifically, right? But Embiid struggling in the postseason, can't get past the hump. We're going to go into that head on, address it, acknowledge it. Same thing with Harden, but more specifically with this Sixers team overall. You've been to the second round however many seasons in a row now. You can't get over that hump. What is stopping us from getting over that hump? And I like that he said he's going to address that head on. But I do agree. It's a fresh start, sure. It's great that Morey finally has his guy at head coach, right?
But that's still sitting right here, right? That's still right on. That's still right in the back of your head.
It's always going to be there. And it's going to be talked about all season. Next season.
Yeah, and to Jeremy's point, like when you brought in the new coach that can push forward, but when you have the same core here and the same guy in Joel that's dealt with the same thing over and over and over again, it is going to be a little bit difficult of a task for the new head coach to kind of get them to believe in this. The number one I want to ask you before we wrap up here, kind of like what you're most looking forward to Nick Nurse bringing to the table. And dude, my main thing here is bringing that culture, setting to the locker room and building winning tendencies. Dude, winning's hard. And I think we take that for granted. It is very difficult. But unfortunately for us with all these second round exits, there's not a lot of winning tendencies in this locker room. Sure, we brought over PJ Tucker, who's won a title. Same ending, right? We brought over this guy. Same ending. For Nick Nurse to come in here, winning that championship, winning at all the levels he's won at, competing, all this stuff. bringing that winning culture here and teaching Joel Embiid, and if James Harden comes back because he's never won, and a young Tyrese Maxey, teaching them how to win and to play like winners is the number one thing I'm looking forward to, because that to me just brings a whole different mentality and mindset to Joel heading into a postseason run that he might not have had before.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there. It's a great point with Nick Nurse, and I'm looking forward to that as well. What I would say that I'm looking forward to the most with Nick Nurse, and it kind of alludes to what you were talking about there as well, but just the kind of mad scientist type of persona when it comes to coaching. He's in the lab, right? When he's out there in the court, the regular season, that's going to be lab work. That's going to be him in the lab figuring out what this team does well. Something that he said as well, and I know we've had a lot of takeaways at this point from that press conference, but
It was great.
He was great. He gave us answers, right? Like, we never get answers, and I think it was great to get that transparency from him. But he talked about, you mentioned winning tendencies, but he talked about, trying something new in the regular season. So say the pick and roll, right, worked with the Milwaukee Bucks, and George Niang worked against the Milwaukee Bucks. So now we can put that in our backpack or in our suitcase and then come back to that for the Milwaukee Bucks, right? It doesn't mean that George Niang's going to work against the Boston Celtics. That might not be the case there. And it's okay to change the way you approach things against different teams in different atmospheres at different levels.
So something to the same extent, but I think it was a different comment that he made, was he basically said, look, I'm not coming in here to flip and change everything. Like I'm going to take what these guys have done well, and that's going to stay in our bag, right? Like that pick and roll, like whatever they've done well, that's going to stay in our bag. But all those bad tendencies, all those losing tendencies, although whatever bad personnel decisions, whatever, that stuff we're going to adjust. So he's not coming in here with just a different playbook. This is not Doc Rivers' playbook, Nick Nurse playbook. This is the new one you're getting. You're going to see similar things from last year's 76ers moving forward, especially if Harden's back. But you're also going to retool it and fix it and adjust it and switch it to how Nick Nurse wants to run his offense. It's not just the offense, man. Defensively. Defensively, the Sixers have been very good, and that's a lot to do with their rim protector. I'm interested to see how Nurse changes the offense or the defense around Joel Embiid.
Yeah. More turnovers, more transition opportunities. I think
getting into the transition defense. Holy shit, it's a thing.
Exactly.
Anyway, man, before we wrap up the show, the Phillies got swept.
Of course. Thanks for bringing us back down.
Scotty.
And it was a miserable sweep. It was not a pleasant, they had a chance. It was miserable.
I'm only bringing it up because I feel like we're going to be touching on it throughout the summer, and I need this to be said, man. Like I have to say this. I'm not out on the Phillies. Like I'm not declaring that the season is over here on June 2nd. I'm not one of those people. But I'm on a break. So sorry, brother. Your favorite team. I had to for you. I'm on a break. I'm on a hiatus with the Fightins until proven otherwise. I'm out. I'm paused. Because it is going to take more than one win. It is going to take more than, how sometimes we like to say you could point to a walk-off win or a big hit that kind of brings the energy, brings the momentum back to this team, and they go on a run. It's going to take more than a walk-off win. It's going to take more than one game. It's going to take more than one series for me to start to believe in this team. And I don't know what's wrong with the team itself, Scotty. I really don't. You look at this lineup. I know Alec Boehm's injured now, but like, go ahead.
What did you think of Rob Thompson's comments about the last few teams coming off a World Series run like the Phillies have all had this kind of hangover the next season?
Listen, it might be a fact. It might be a fact, Rob. That's a loser statement. That is just accepting what's going on right now. Well, it's happened. It happened to the last couple teams, so why should we be any different? I don't know. Maybe because we're trying to get back to the World Series.
We're trying to actually win the World Series.
We're not trying to dig a 19-game hole by July. Dude, they are so lifeless. And it's, Scotty, it's top to bottom, bro. You could have a day where the pitching staff looks great. The other night, Ranger Suarez looked phenomenal. The first time he's looked good since returning from injury. Well, they can't get a hit. You might have a game where they score 6 runs, but Aaron Nola's giving those runs back every next half inning. It doesn't end. They can't get on the same page. And that's, again, been the story of the Phillies for the last 5 years is when the pitching's going good, the bats can't wake up. When the bats are electric, the pitching stinks, okay? But it's I look more so I'm looking at the lineup right now because I believe they've scored I'd have to go back and find this number, but they've only scored either 7 or 9 runs over their last, I forget how many, 5-6 games. Like, it's been a nightmare, okay? They've struck out a shit ton. Schwarber's hitting $160. Scotty, listen, I think we both predicted him to take a step back from last season's production-wise. He's an absolute mess. He's a mess. $160, dude? $160. Trey Turner's hitting what? Trey Turner's going to be fine. You know how I feel about Trey. But my God, I mean.
He's catching the heat now. It's turning up on him.
Because, dude, it's not 2 weeks anymore.
Yeah.
You're talking
He's
a third of the season is over now. And the dude's hitting under 240 or whatever.
Yeah. 9 runs in their last 5 games.
Jesus Lord.
Yeah. And
the problem I have, Scotty.
Yeah.
Is they split with the Braves. You split 4 with Atlanta in Atlanta. You did your jobs. That was a light at the end of the tunnel. That was something positive I was taking forward, regardless of how Sunday Night Baseball looked with Covey on the mound.
Yeah.
But then you come out after that, and you get swept by the Mets. You don't put up more than 2 runs in any of the 3 games. In the first game, you didn't reach second base. They didn't have a runner on second. They had 2 hits. Josh Harrison and Cody Clemens were the 2 hits in this game, and neither guy reached second base.
Let me ask you this. If the Phillies, they got a big series obviously starting today against the Washington Nationals, right? Obviously another NL East opponent.
That's another thing. Rob came out and the Nationals are playing good ball. Get the fuck out of here.
Well, you lose this series, they'll jump you, or if they're not already ahead of you, right? So who knows? For Rob, it may be good baseball to him, but if they come out of this, right? Say they're 2-5 on this NL East trip, you could call it, right? The 4 games against the Braves, 3 against the Mets. They obviously lose all 3 against the Mets, go 2-2 against the Braves. They're 2-5 right now, so they would have to win all 3 against the Washington Nationals to get to 5-5, 500 on that stretch. Would that be success at that point? Like, how do you look at that?
Listen,
like, if they're able to do that,
to start to turn things around, yes, that's going to be what it takes.
They need it, right?
However, when you look back on the fact, if you swept the Nationals and you split with the Braves, something went wrong in the middle there because that's your 5 wins already. Like, you're 5-2. Oh, what went wrong? Oh, you got swept by the Mets. Dude, they're like 5-25 or whatever in their last 30 games against the Mets. It's really bad. Like the other day when Nola was pitching, I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. Like Mark Canha drove in all 4 runs or whatever. Like this dude Beatty's ripping gap shots. It's not Alonso. It's not Lindor. It's
right.
oh dear Lord.
This 3-game series coming up against the Nationals, it's not like it can make your season. Don't get me wrong there. Like just getting 3 wins against the or just going 2-1 even coming out of this 4-6, right? That would not be the worst case at this point. But it can, in a sense, break your season, right? Break any hope that Phillies fans have left. Mind you, you don't give up in June, right? It's not that serious.
No.
But this is a series where you could now fall under the Washington Nationals. You're already behind the Mariners, you're behind the Braves, and you're behind the Mets. You could fall to what, 5th place in the NL East if you lose this series to the Washington Nationals?
They are 1 game above Washington.
They're 1 game
Holy
above the
shit.
Washington Nationals right now, man.
Wow.
So,
Listen.
not make or break. I don't want to put that type of situation in June, but it could certainly break your spirit altogether if you go and you lose this series against the Nationals. You need to go 2-1 at least over these next 3. I mean, obviously that's a given, but it'd be nice to go 3-0, man, just to make a statement, for God's sake.
Here's the craziest part. Not that like 8 isn't a lot, but like they're only 8 games out of first. And I don't say that to like bring up the fact that I think they can win the division. They have a 0% shot of winning the division.
Yeah.
The playoffs, the wild card's another thing, right? But they have a 0% shot of winning the division. It's just crazy that like June 2nd, they're 8 games out. It's just the way they're playing, man. You're 6 games on. You're 6 games under 500. You're 3-7 in your last 10. For Christ's sake, you're what? You've lost 11 of your last 16, I believe. 12 of your last 17.
Yeah,
dude, the Braves are 4-6 in their last 10, and you've lost ground.
Yeah.
The only saving grace I can give you is like, when you look at the wild card, right? You go away from division leaders. So you got teams like Miami's ahead of us right now. Do you think that's going to continue? No, right? And the Central stinks. Like the Brewers lead the Central, and they're only a couple games better than us on the year. You got the Pirates, the Reds, the Cardinals are 7 games under 500. The Cubs are 7 games under 500. They're bad right now. You go to the West. I mean, the Padres are 26-30. They were supposed to have a good year. The Giants are fighting for a wild card. They're 28-28. So my point is, when you're talking Marlins, Pirates, Reds, Giants, there's room for optimism to think if the Phils can even just turn this around slightly, they're going to have a solid shot for that 3rd wild card again.
If they could just start doing something consistently good,
if they could
a
just
goddamn
play,
identity.
If they could just look like a major league team.
Yeah.
If they weren't kicking away ground balls, if they weren't making base running mistakes, if they just man, I don't know. The manager has an issue at the moment. The lineup can't figure it out. And dude, it is too talented of a lineup to have these issues. I don't know what the problem is. There's nothing I can pinpoint. Nothing. Like, I know Bohm just got hurt. He was placed on the 10-day IL, but before that, he was in the lineup. Dude, you are talking about Trey Turner, Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber, Nick Castellanos, who has been great most of the season, Bryson Stott, who's been great most of the season, Brandon Marsh, who's been great most of the season, Alec Bohm. Sosa's been a much better hitter than I ever could have imagined at the back end of this lineup. JT Realmuto. This lineup is too talented for the shit that they're producing right now. And the same thing could be said for this rotation. There's too many names. There's too many heavy hitters for this rotation to have over a 5 combined ERA.
There's
a lot wrong with this team right now. But to me, there's nothing drastically wrong with them, if that makes sense. That's why it's so frustrating as a Phillies fan on a night-to-night basis right now, because I have no confidence that they're going to head into a ball game and win it, but they still should. Like,
it's almost it's like you said earlier. It's more or less, even if they get a lead in a game, it's like, how are they going to give this up?
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like,
right?
that's where we're at.
If they get an early lead, you're guaranteed to give it right back the next half inning.
The next inning.
And if they get down by 1 or 2, it feels insurmountable to come back.
Yeah. Because they can't get hits in big positions with runners
that's
in scoring
just the
position.
lack of confidence.
Now they can't even get runners
right
in
now,
scoring
dude.
position.
That's all it is. It's the lack of confidence they have coming their aura right now, and they need to start to figure that out. And listen, I don't know.
Leadership needs to step up, man.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to take like Kyle Schwarber getting ejected, Bryce Harper throwing a trash can against the wall. I don't know what it takes to rally the troops and figure the F out. But I'm tired of hearing the same old comments, from Kyle Schwarber about how, no one's going to feel sorry for us and we got to turn this thing around. No shit. Dude. How about this?
That's why we're talking about it.
160 ain't helping turning it around. Scotty, you are talking almost unplayable.
Yeah.
You realize that?
Yeah.
Almost unplayable. Yeah. If he wasn't known for his power, he would not start on this team with how he's playing. Yeah. And he plays every day. Almost out of necessity. Well, it's June now, Kyle. It's June. Trey, buddy, I want the whole Delaware Valley went out and bought that jersey. Bought that number 7 jersey for you. Where are you, bro? Scotty, again, you want to talk about that moment you should be able to look back on and pinpoint on when things
changed. He's talking about his mom, right?
2-run home run ties the game with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th at home. You walk it off the next inning. He hasn't done anything since.
Let me ask you this.
Fuck.
Is there anything that they can do as we approach the trade deadline? Is there anything there? I know we still got plenty of time before that, but is there anything there that could change?
It has to be pitching.
The wavelength
right?
of this
It
team.
has to be pitching. And
starting.
I don't, right? And it would have to be a starter because this bullpen, Alvarado's on his way back.
You need a third starter at this point.
Essentially, yeah, because your two thirds aren't pitching like that right now.
Yeah.
There's no update with Andrew Painter, and even when Painter comes back, we're going to rely on the rookie to kind of lead the way here and help solidify this rotation. I think you need a starter. There's nothing really you can add to the bullpen. Sure, that you could go out and get a minimal piece. But you have guys back there that just need to figure it out. Soto needs to be more consistent.
Yeah.
Kimbrel needs to be more consistent. Alvarado was dominant. Strom's been great. Brogdon's been fine. Their bullpen's deep enough and has enough guys back there. The lineup, like I said, the lineup's struggling. And normally you would say what can we do to fix this?
Yeah.
Where are you going to put a new piece? Unless you go out and trade for a first baseman and move Bowen back to every day at third, and you have a new first baseman. But outside of that, there's no hole there. You don't need a DH. You have a plethora of DHs, catcher, shortstop, second, third,
and the
left.
Thing is,
your outfield's taken.
You have to ask yourself, in the first base perspective, right, with Bohm, or whether you bring in somebody to work third base permanently, whatever the case may be. Cody Clemens has not been that much of an issue, right?
And Derek Hall's on his way back.
Derek Hall will come back. Those guys haven't been the issue necessarily. Right. It's actually the guys that are your everyday starters that are giving you the problems, man.
Right.
That's the main issue right now.
Absolutely. So I would say an arm, and I don't even mean that as in a fifth starter that can be serviceable. Because you need a guy that can throw innings right now. You sent Falter down. Right, yeah. I don't need to see Covey pitch on Sunday Night Baseball ever again.
Who's the guy that I just saw?
Shane Bieber.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah,
that would be a dream, but I don't know.
What do you got to give up to get a guy like that?
Right,
that's
exactly.
The big question.
But yeah, man, I would say pitching. Obviously, we have over a month until a month and a half till that deadline, whenever that is. But had to get that off my chest because there's so much going wrong with this team, man. But I can't pinpoint what exactly the fix is because there is no fix. The bottom line, Scotty, I know it sounds so cliche. They just need to play better.
Yeah.
They just need to figure it out. There's no roster fix. There's no adjustment.
Just saw Brett's comment.
Yeah, brother, we're about to wrap this thing up.
We had a very uplifting combo with Sean Barnard. So
go check that out. You'll like that conversation.
Check that out.
But guys, that is going to wrap up this Friday edition of the Phaithful Phanatics Show. We will not be live on Monday, but we will be back on Wednesday morning here on DSM Media's YouTube and Twitter channels. Guys, again, don't forget that the Phaithful Fanatic Show is proudly brought to you by our friends over at Manscaped. Use promo code DSM at checkout for 20% off plus free shipping. Again, that is promo code DSM for 20% off your total order plus free shipping over at manscaped.com. Your balls will certainly thank you. For myself, for Scotty, for the rest of DSM Media, have a great weekend.
Let's go Titans.
And Philadelphia